I'm not a pilot, I do make mistakes. The information provided in these tutorials is only to get you guys up in the virtual sky. None of it is accurate enough for real world application. Welcome back. So you're probably running out of fuel by this point, so let's get you back on the ground. So like I said earlier, we've got training here. So if you click into training, you can go to the Mustang trainer. There's cockpit familiarization, engine start procedure, taxi, takeoff, guided practice, takeoff solo practice, and landing. So if you want to add to the basic information I'm giving you, this is a good place to come. This is the next step. That'll tell you how to do the procedures correctly. But for now, what we're going to do, we're going to go back into instant action. We're going to go hot start from Batumi parking. We're going to get you up in the air. You're going to have your flaps up, gear up, and your needles back in the green, and we'll continue from there. And I apologize for the audio recording in the next one. It is a little bit quiet, and I am struggling to get over the top of the Mustang engine. I do apologize for that, but it was recorded and the settings had changed on my microphone for some reason, and I feel the information given in that section is quite good. I don't really want to redo it and ruin it because that's what I do, so apologies for the audio volumes in the next section. Okay, so hopefully you've put your flaps up, your gear up, and you've put your needles, these two needles, back in the green again. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn right. Now, the general rule to begin with, and we'll get into the details as of why and where and what later, you want to land in the same direction you took off from, and we'll get to the reason why you do that. But it's a general rule. Without knowing too much information, you can actually get by with just that. But I'll explain why we do that later. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go over these buildings. This little town down here, we're going to line up as perpendicular to the runway as possible. We're going to go over these hills here, so we're going to go over the first set, and before the second set we're going to turn right, and then when we hit the river we're going to turn right again and try and line up with the runway. Now the warbirds, they don't like to lose speed too quickly, so these behave a little bit differently to the newer aircraft. Now I mean, when you've got, you know, a couple of tons moving at 300 knots, it does take a bit of time to slow down, so we'll give ourselves a little bit of room. Landing is different. There are universal variables, but they do change. They are quite varied between the aircraft that you're landing. The general rule is that you can come down pretty much at 3 degrees, but the angle of attack is different. Now we'll get into what angle of attack is a little bit later, but in the meantime, you remember how I said that the reference point was this horn? Remember where the horn is in relation to the runway when you're on the ground? Basically we're going to try and do a 3-point landing, which means all 3 of the wheels of the Mustang hit the ground at the same time. We're going to try that. That is quite difficult. We're going to try it, but what that means is that the nose is up. So the path of the aircraft is actually different to the angle of the aircraft, and that's what they mean by angle of attack. We'll go into detail on what that means and what that is later, and that is something that is used throughout. It's not just for landings. That's used in a lot of different situations, and we can go into that more in depth. Now don't worry too much about altitudes or anything like that at this stage. We're just doing a visual. We're going to do this all visually. It's not by the book. We're just going to do this through muscle memory, and later on we'll do a landing in a modern aircraft and I'll show you the differences. So we're kind of going over the river now, so we'll turn right. Now these aircraft, like I said, they don't like to slow down, so what we're going to do, we're going to try and keep the aircraft around or above 100 knots, but not that far off. So that there on the left in the middle, far left in the middle, is your speed. So we're going to pull the throttle down a little bit while we line up, and we're going to bring that RPM all the way back. Now flaps down and gear out, and we're going to make sure that that turns green, and we're going to throttle down quite far actually. Now this will change because we're doing it visually. Now flaps and gear are speed dependent, so don't bring them out when you're too fast, but we're not going to worry about that in this tutorial. Alright, so I'm starting to slow down a bit too much. I'm going to put the throttle up just a little bit, and I'm going to push the engine RPM all the way forward, because we want to stay close to 100. Now I'm going to try and keep the runway in my field of view for as long as possible. And at the last minute we're going to flare, which means pull the nose up. So I'm going to throttle down a little bit now because we want to slow down, so I'm going to try and bring it under 100. Going to nose up, so this is the angle of attack. We're going to change the angle of attack here, and that's a very, very hard hit, but we got a 3-point landing, which is what we're looking for. So RPM and throttle all the way back. Don't worry about that red light. Slowly apply the brakes so you don't nose into the dirt. And there's your first landing done. Okay, so we're doing the landing mission in instant action for the A10C2. Just for reference, with the modern Cold War aircraft that have a lot of instruments and cool things to help you along your way versus the old World War II aircraft. So we've got a lot going on in front of us. This is the velocity vector that tells you pretty much the direction of where the aircraft is going. That's the little symbol that looks like wings and a tail. That's very helpful. We've also got the horizon degrees indicator. So we've got the 5-degree line, the 10-degree line, and the horizon line, and everything in between. And we're also going to use the angle of attack indicator. So if the arrow at the bottom is on, pointing up, that means we're too fast, and if the arrow at the top is pointing down, that means we're too slow. If we have the little circle in the middle on, it means that we're on speed. It's a little confusing because it's the other way around. Having an arrow at the bottom means that we're too fast, and an arrow at the top pointing down means that we're too slow. It can get a little confusing, but you'll get used to it. And if you've got an arrow and the circle, it means you're just a little bit too fast or a little bit too slow, depending on which one's highlighted. Now, the universal variables that I keep talking about, one of them is the angle at which you're landing. So 3 degrees generally works. So I'm just going to power down. I'm going to put my flaps out and my gear out. We're not going to worry about doing it at the right speed. And you'll see the velocity vector change as well. Because our aerodynamics have changed. We've got the flaps out but the gears out, so it's creating drag, it's changing where the aircraft is going. And one of the universal rules is pretty much 3 degrees. So if you're landing at 3 degrees, you're doing pretty good. That does change with each aircraft. Oh, the flaps have come out now, so I'm producing more lift, so the velocity vector's gone up. So if you're landing between 3 degrees, that's generally good for most aircraft. However, that does change, and that's something we'll look at in a moment. So we want to put the runway between the 5-degree and the horizon line. And we want to watch that angle of attack indicator, which is, I'm just going to keep decelerating so you'll get to see what it looks like when you get too slow. So we're on speed now. and we're too slow, and we're going to go thwomp because we're too slow. Bam, there we go. But you could actually see the angle of attack indicator tell you when we're too slow, too fast, too slow, on speed. That's the rate, and even we got a little bit of a little too fast and a little too slow. So that's the full range that you'll see in there. But really what you want to do, especially with the A10, is come in at 3 degrees. So you put the rubber marks on the runway between the 5 degree and horizon line on the HUD. Put the velocity vector on the rubber marks. Try and keep that at where 3 degrees should be. Make sure that velocity, the AOA indicator, hits circle, and keep it there, and then you'll land fine. So what we'll do with the AOA, that changes between all the aircraft, but the general rule is 3 degrees is okay. However, we're going to have a quick look at the F-16 because aircraft are all different. So when I'm talking about these universal variables, things that you need to check with every aircraft, when I said that you land at 3 degrees, and we call that the glide slope, the F-16 is an exception to that rule. It's not 3 degrees, it's 2.5, which that's only a small difference, but the aircraft will help you with that. But this, what I'm demonstrating here, is the difference. And the angle of attack is different for all aircraft, but that's okay because you have the angle of attack indicator to help you with that. With the F-16, because landing is very precise at a 2.5 instead of a 3 degree, what will happen is when I put the landing gear down, you'll see an extra line pop up between the horizon line and the 5 degree line. And what we're going to do, we're going to try and put that line where we want to land on the runway, which is going to be that rubber section where you see all the rubber laid down, and we're going to try and put the velocity vector in between that 2.5 degree line. So it's going to happen relatively quickly. So I'm just going to get that out there. As soon as this starts, I'm going to put the gear down and I'm going to put the flaps out. Now, like I said, they are dependent on speed. So depending on how fast you go, they might not come out, or sometimes they will come out and you'll end up damaging the aircraft, but we're not going to worry about those speeds or anything like that. You just need to be aware that when you need to be pretty slow for those things to either come out, because there'll be some kind of a system check to say you're going too fast, so we're not going to do that, or you're going to damage the gear. So what we're going to do, I'm going to throttle down a bit before we start, and I'm going to put the gear out and the flaps down. Now, as you can see, there's no extra line there, but it'll pop up relatively quickly. See, there it is, that line there, you see that? That extra 3 dotted line. So what we want to do is put that where we want to land, and with the F-16 as well, we need to put the speed brakes out when we land, and we're going to fight against the extra drag of the speed brakes. So I'm going to power up, I'm going to get that velocity vector where I want it, and now we're coming in at the right angle, but we're not coming in at the right speed. So I'm going to keep the nose up. The nose is very much down from where it should be. It's still a little bit low. So this is the 11 degrees angle of attack with having the nose up, and we should hit, there we go. We came in a little steep, so there's a little bit of a bang there, but this really is only for a reference. Okay, the basic rules are 3 degrees and you watch your angle of attack indicator, but there are exceptions, just as I've shown you with this one. So what you'll need to pay attention to is the angle of attack and the glide slope. So just double check those with the aircraft that you're flying. Closer to 0, the more dangerous your landing actually is. Correct procedure in the real world, as far as I'm aware, is that you need, depending on the aircraft that you're in, you need to hit the ground at a specific feet per minute speed. And the reason they do that is the closer to 0 you get, the higher chance of having a wheel blowout. So you're expected to not bounce, you're expected to not graze the tyres, you're expected to put the tyres firmly at a reasonable speed on the runway. So that's it for this training video. Thanks for watching, and I hope I've helped you.